There was once a king who had 11 sons and one daughter, Elisa, gentle and beloved by them all. In the bright years of their childhood, the palace seemed full of music, lessons, games, and the simple happiness of a family not yet broken by envy. The brothers rode together, studied together, and loved their little sister with a devotion that was both playful and protective. Had the story ended there, it would hardly have been Andersen's, for happiness in his tales is often only the fragile beginning, a light meant to make the coming darkness more piercing when it arrives. After the death of their mother, the king married again, and the new queen entered the palace with beauty, grace, and a heart sharpened by jealousy. She saw at once how dearly the children were loved, and in that love she found not something to join, but something to resent. Her smile was careful, her words were measured, yet beneath all the refinement lay an old cruelty waiting for its moment. Elisa, still very young, could not fully understand it. Her brothers sensed unease, but none of them yet knew how swiftly affection can be poisoned when power falls into unkind hands. One day, when the king was away, the queen worked her malice openly. She cast a spell upon the 11 princes, and before they could flee, their human forms were transformed into great white swans. They beat their wings in confusion and grief as they were driven from the kingdom, their voices reduced to cries beneath the sky. Elisa, meanwhile, was sent far away to be raised among peasants, and the queen used her art to cloud the child's beauty, so that even those who saw her might turn from her. Thus the royal house was scattered, not by war, but by enchantment and spite. As Elisa grew older, the spell upon her appearance faded, and her quiet beauty returned. But when she came back toward the palace, hoping perhaps for home and recognition, the queen made certain she would not be welcomed. Through lies, fear, and dark appearances, she turned others against the girl until Elisa was forced to leave once more. Alone she went into the forest, carrying in her heart only sorrow and the memory of her brothers. The trees received her with more kindness than the court had done. There, among shadows and birdsong, her true journey began. One evening, as the sun poured red light across the sky, Elisa saw 11 white swans descending toward a lonely stretch of shore. Their beauty pierced her with recognition she could not explain. When night fell, the swans shed their feathers and became her brothers once more, though only until dawn. The reunion was full of tears, wonder, and grief. They told her what the queen had done, and Elisa understood at last the shape of the sorrow that had shadowed all her life. Yet with the telling came hope, for if enchantment had been made, perhaps enchantment might also be undone. That night Elisa dreamed, or perhaps was visited, by a radiant figure who told her the only way to free her brothers. She must gather stinging nettles from churchyards and lonely places, crush them with her bare feet, and weave from them 11 shirts. If these shirts were thrown over the swans, the spell would be broken. But there was one condition more terrible than the labor itself. From the moment she began the work until it was finished, Elisa must not speak a single word. One sound from her lips would become a dagger in her brothers' hearts. Elisa accepted at once. Love rarely pauses to count the cost. She gathered nettles from graveyards under moonlight, where the air itself seemed thin with sorrow. Their sting burned her hands and arms until her skin blistered. By day she wove in silence. By night she gathered more. The task was ugly, painful, and lonely, yet she did not falter. In her silence there was no passivity. It was an active, suffering devotion, a vow made visible through endurance. Such silence, in Andersen, is never emptiness. It is speech compressed into sacrifice. While Elisa labored in the forest, a young king out hunting found her there, beautiful, silent, and surrounded by work no one could understand. He was struck at once by her presence, which seemed both sorrowful and noble. Though she could not answer his questions, he brought her to his palace and, against the unease of his court, chose her for his queen. Elisa accepted, not from ambition, but because it allowed her to continue her work in safety. Even in royal chambers she sat silent, weaving nettles into garments that appeared to all others grim, mysterious, and deeply unsettling. But the strange often becomes frightening to those who cannot interpret it. The archbishop and the court watched Elisa with suspicion. They saw her silent ways, her midnight journeys to gather nettles, and the rough green shirts hidden in her chamber. To them, such acts did not suggest devotion. They suggested witchcraft. Whispers grew. Fear sharpened into accusation. Elisa, who might have defended herself with a few simple words, remained silent for her brother's sake. This is one of the tale's cruelest truths. Innocence is not always protected by silence, even when silence itself is an act of love. At last, Elisa was accused openly and condemned. The people believed they were seeing a sorceress. The king, torn between love and fear, failed to save her. Yet even as she was led away in chains, Elisa continued weaving. She had nearly finished. Her hands bled. Her face was pale. Her silence remained unbroken. She carried the unfinished shirts with her all the way to the place of execution, still working as the wheels turned and the crowd gathered. Death was approaching, but the task was not yet complete. In such moments, Andersen lets the soul appear strongest, precisely when the world has declared it lost. As Elisa stood upon the scaffold, the sky suddenly darkened with wings. Her 11 brothers came flying over the crowd in their swan forms, crying out in anguish. The people recoiled in terror and wonder. Elisa, who had almost finished the last shirt, worked with desperate speed. The moment toward which all suffering had moved was now upon her. The king watched. The crowd watched. Heaven itself seemed to hold its breath. Between death and deliverance stood only one unfinished sleeve, and the unbroken faith of a sister who had refused speech, comfort, and safety for love. Then Elisa cast the shirts over the swans one by one. As each garment touched white feathers, a prince stood where a bird had been. The enchantment shattered before the eyes of all. She reached the last brother just in time, though one sleeve remained unfinished, and so one of his arms stayed forever a swan's wing. At that very moment, freed at last from the silence she had borne so long, Elisa spoke. She told the truth. The accusation against her fell away like dust, and all who had judged her saw too late that what they had feared as darkness had in fact been holiness in labor. Her words, long denied, now carried the weight of all the pain through which they had been withheld. The crowd who had come to witness punishment instead witnessed revelation. The king, overcome with remorse and love, understood at last the greatness of the woman he had almost allowed to die. The princes stood beside their sister, restored to human form, their long sorrow ended by hands that had bled for them in secret. Few scenes in Andersen are as fierce in their release as this one, where innocence is vindicated not gently, but in the full blaze of last-minute deliverance. Though one brother retained a wing in place of an arm, all were freed, and even that small remnant of enchantment seemed less a wound than a mark of what had been endured. Elisa was reunited with those she loved, and the kingdom, which had nearly destroyed her, now honored her. Yet the tale does not forget what it cost. The pain of the nettles, the graveyards, the silence, the false accusation, the scaffold, all remain woven into the story like threads that cannot be removed. Deliverance here is real, but it is not light. It has been purchased dearly. The Wild Swans is one of Andersen's grand tales of sacrifice. It joins beauty to ordeal, innocence to endurance, and love to an almost unbearable form of labor. Elisa is not powerful in the ordinary fairy tale sense. She casts no spells. She commands no armies. Her strength is made of silence, fidelity, and the willingness to suffer without spectacle for the sake of others. That is why the story feels both severe and luminous. It understands that salvation, in some lives, is not dramatic conquest, but patient faithfulness woven in pain. And so the swans flew no more in sorrow, but the memory of their years of exile remained, as did the memory of the sister who saved them. In Andersen's world, love is rarely easy, and goodness is rarely protected from misunderstanding. Yet he still insists that it matters. Elisa's silence, her wounds, and her unwavering devotion become the very means by which darkness is undone. That is why the Wild Swans endures. It is not merely magical. It is moral in the deepest sense, asking what love is worth when no one sees it rightly until the final hour.